There are 20 new mind-blowing Figma updates which will definitely change the way you work. For example, now you can resize images and they'll snap to the perfect aspect ratio. You can take away extra text spacing with vertical trim. And you can add sticky scrolling to prototypes. Plus a whole lot more. I'm Adi for Envato Tuts Plus, and in this video, I'm going to show you the most recent Figma updates related to text, images, components, and libraries, prototypes, and finally, some quality of life stuff. And before we get into all that, here's a resource that will also change the way you work. Envato Elements offers all the creative digital assets you need under one subscription. Customize your project today by adding unique photos, fonts, graphics, and themes. For more information, check out the links in the video description. Alright then, let's get started with the latest changes related to text. Before we get started with the text-related changes, here's a quick reminder that on the Envato Tuts Plus YouTube channel, you can find tons of Figma-related content, so make sure you hit that subscribe button. Now, let's move on and start with leading trim. Let's say you want to create a button or a badge, something like this, and there's something that doesn't feel right about the text, right? If you select it, you can see that it has the same distance from, top and bottom, but the text box itself has a different spacing on the top than on the bottom. And this is a very common occurrence because of the way line height works and how certain fonts are being rendered in Figma. Well, now you can do vertical trimming in Figma, which works the following way. You select the text, you go to the inspector in the text properties, and right here where it says vertical trim, you have this option that says cap height to baseline. And when you do that, magic, this happens basically. The text box itself is only going to be as tall as the text, no extra space on the top and bottom. And this creates a much cleaner appearance for that button or that badge or whatever it was that you were trying to create. Same thing goes for this example. We do the same, trim, bam. Now it just looks a lot better. You don't have to worry about how that particular piece of text is rendered. In Figma, by using a vertical trim, you get much better text alignment. Moving on to the second change, which is hanging punctuation. This is actually a typographic tool that's used to create optically aligned blocks of text. So, for example, in here, I have two pieces of text, right? The first line actually starts with a quote, which actually offsets the first word a little bit to the right side. So it doesn't quite match up with the rest of the text. Well, fear not. In Figma, you now have an option to implement hanging punctuation, which will make, well, punctuation such as quotations and brackets hang outside of the text box. So if we go again in the inspector in the text or type settings, we can go under details, and here we can turn on hanging punctuation, and voila, what is happening is the quotation mark just moves outside of the text box, allowing the text to now be positioned correctly and aligned nicely, just like that. So here's the before and here's the after. So now this looks a lot better than before. Awesome. Moving on to update number 3. Numbered lists no longer have to start with the number 1. So let's zoom in here. And let's say that I want to turn this list in a 2-column list just to match what I have above, right? So we would do that the following way. We would duplicate it, right? Maybe select both, do a Shift-A to add an auto frame. I would do something like this. I would set that to fill container and maybe grab these two and set their size to fill container. And of course, let's also set the height there to hug. So what I want to do is I want to have the first 2 steps on the left column and the other 2 steps in the right column. But as you can see, this starts with 1 and 2, and I have 1 and 2 here. Well, before there was nothing I could do, but with this new Figma update, I can now say, okay, this is number 3, and automatically that becomes number 4. So you can now create numbered lists that start with any number you want. Super cool. All right, time to discover some image-related changes, and we start with something amazing: snap to aspect ratio. So let's consider this example. I have some square images here, 480 by 480, and I want to make them either taller or longer, but I want them to be a certain aspect ratio, and the most common are 3 by 2, 4 by 3, and what you would usually do is you would get one of the sizes, either the width or the height, and you would Google for an aspect ratio calculator, and you would get the other dimension. Or there are actually Figma plugins that will do that for you. Well, no longer, because now in Figma, you can simply resize an image and it will automatically snap to a perfect aspect ratio. In this example, we have 720 by 480, which, if we do a calculation, is 1.5. So that's 3 by 2. How cool is that? And you saw just how easily it snaps. We also get that, that guide on the bottom telling us that, hey, you've snapped to a perfect aspect ratio. And this works, of course, vertically as well. So if I'm going to start resizing this vertically this way, yeah, it's going to snap it to 640 pixels. So if we do 640 divided by 480, that's 1.33. And if I'm not mistaken, that's 4 by 3 aspect ratio. And from what I've tested, these seem to be the 2 ratios that Figma will snap to. We don't know if more will be added in the future, but for now, these are the ones that we have. And personally, I think they're more than enough. Really awesome functionality, snap to aspect ratio for images. And if for some reason you would like to disable the snapping, well, you can simply hold down Control and that will disable all the snapping functionality. Next up, we have image pasting improvements. So let's consider this image right here. We have basically a rectangle with an image background and a color overlay, right? We can clearly see how this looks like if we turn them on and off. And of course, we have like a solid color fill here at the bottom. Now, let's say that I don't want to use this picture anymore for this element. So I'm going to Unsplash, searching for another picture. Maybe I want this one, right? So I'm just going to copy this image. And with the shape selected, I'm just going to paste it in. And surely enough, the image changes, but all the other fills that I had are now gone. So I would have to remake them. Well, not anymore, because let's do an undo here. You can now select a specific fill color that you want to replace. So if you go with your mouse cursor to the left of the fill colors here, you can, for example, just click on the image, Control V or Command V, and that new image is going to be pasted in that fill. All the others will stay intact. Of course, I can select this one and I can do Command V and it's going to replace it with the image. Or I can do this one. It really doesn't matter. Super simple, a really, really welcomed addition. The next update allows us to realign images while we are in editing mode. So I have this image here that's part of a frame. And as you can see, it's not currently aligned. Well, I can now double click to enter edit mode, and I can also align it just the way I see fit. You couldn't do that before. As soon as you entered edit mode, these options here would be grayed out. But now I can, crop the image, edit, in any way that I see fit, and then also do some alignment. Pretty cool stuff. The next update is a bomb, really. It's basically on-canvas preview for blend modes. Now, how many times have you played around with blend modes not knowing exactly what they do? Well, a million times, I guarantee I've done the same. But with this new option, you can actually preview the changes without actually selecting a blend mode. So to show you that, let's add a gradient fill to this image. Let's say I want to make this image stand out just a bit more. So I'm going to add a new fill here, and I'm going to choose from a linear. And for colors, we'll go from this one to this one. Right, so we're going blue to purple. Great. Let's bump up the opacity all the way up. So now we basically have a gradient on top of that image. Now, I would like to kind of blend that gradient with the image to get a nice effect. So what I can do is I can select the fill, I can click on this little icon here that says blend mode, and now look what happens. As soon as I move my mouse cursor over a blend mode, I get an instant preview in the canvas. How cool is that? So before you had to, select one of the blend modes, see what it looked like, and if you didn't like it, click here again, select another one, and so on. Now it's simple. You just move your mouse over each blend mode and you'll see a live preview. So in my case, let's go with overlay. And I think that looks much better. A really fast way just to add visual interest to a picture by using the on-canvas preview for blend modes. And by the way, this doesn't just work for the color picker here, right? It works for the layer mode that you see here. Yeah. And it even works if I'm going to add, for example, maybe an effect, right? Effects also have blend modes, and you can preview that in the effects panel as well. And finally, for the last image-related change, we're looking at luminance masking. So I think we all know what masking is, right? You would use a mask to show a specific area of an object while concealing the rest. Well, in Figma, you can now do luminance masking, which is basically a mask based on the object or the image's brightness. Okay, so to give you an example, I have a rectangle which is filled with this darker color here, and under that, I have this image from Unsplash. And under that, I have this kind of yellowish circle. So what I can do is I can click on the image and I can right-click and select Use as Mask. And by default, Alpha is selected, but now I can select Luminance, and I can also see a nice preview. So Luminance, this uses brightness, and what you'll notice is that now this group is basically a mask, and when we move it, we can actually see what's behind the leaves. As you can see, we're clearly showing the background in this area, but where it intersects the yellow circle, we're showing the yellow background. So you can use this luminous mask to do all kinds of things. So if you're into that kind of thing, definitely a great addition for you. Components and libraries also got some love from the Figma team, and there are 4 changes and additions I want to show you. We start with exposed nested instances. So let's say we have a component like this, which has a bunch of other components inside, right? So we have, for example, this button, and we have some list items here, which are basically instances of these other components. Now, the main components have certain properties. For example, on this list item, I have a trend type, which is positive or negative. I have a title, a shorthand, an icon, a trend, and a price. And each one of these properties corresponds to a certain field within here. Same goes for the button, right? I have a single property, text property called button text. So what I did was I created an instance of this, let's call it widget, right? And if I want to change any of the properties for the nested instances, I kind of have to dig down and select that instance. And then in the inspector here, I have access to those properties, right? Same goes for a list item, for example. I can change the trend type, I can change the title, the shorthand, I can choose the icon, and so on and so forth. But it's still a bit inconvenient because I have to dig down. Well, now in Figma, you can have exposed nested instances that basically allows you to bubble up the properties of the nested instances without you having to kind of select each one individually. So how do you do that? Well, very simple. You select the main component, you click on the plus sign where it says properties, and then you choose expose properties from nested instances. And you can choose which nested instances you want to use to display the properties. So once you do that, you select the instance again, and now you have access to all of those properties without you having to select an individual nested instance. So select this again, and now I can change the properties to all of the instances that I selected previously, right? I can change the icon, I can change the price, the numbers, everything. Super, super cool. And if at any point you decide, maybe I just want to be able to see the properties for the button and not the list items, right? You go back to the main component, you select it, and then you just remove which or the properties for the nested instances. So now when you select that instance again, you just have access to the button text. Of course, you can still, dig deep and select each one and change its properties this way, but they will not be available when you're selecting the main object here. So that's super, super cool. Exposed nested instances. The next change is amazing, and it's actually a great news for people who build design systems, right? So let's say that I have this this instance, right? This nested instance, and I want to change its icon. Well, if we go back to the components here, you can see that I have a lot of icons to choose from, all right? So when I go back to my list item here and I click on the drop down, yeah, I have quite a bit to choose from. But what if there are just a couple of icons that I use frequently? Well, now I can choose what those are because of preferred instances. So here's how I do that. I go to the main component, right? So I can right click, go to main component, and I go under the icon property. And here I see something called preferred values. I click on plus, and then I choose the ones that I think I'm going to use the most. So maybe I'm going to use Bitcoin, maybe Ethereum, and maybe, I don't know, USD coin, something like this. So I click this one as well, right? So now, if I go back to this example, when I'm going to select the icon, it shows me the preferred instances that I selected first. Of course, I can click this, I can go to local components, crypto icon, and then I have access to all of them. But if I just want that set of preferred, now that's an option. It's right here. And that makes it much easier for me to create instances of my components. And this is super useful, for example, if you're creating an icon button, right? You might have an icon set that has 100 different icons. Well, instead of showing 100 different icons in a dropdown here, so users will, just have to search and pick the ones that I want, maybe just go with a couple of preferred ones if you know that those are going to be the most used. So this is just a killer addition. As I said, for anyone who creates design systems, this is particularly useful. So that is preferred instances. Next change is align to nested instances. So here's something you couldn't do before. Let's assume that you have a design and you want to annotate it, or, maybe add some documentation to it. And this is a component, right? And it has a bunch of nested instances. Well, now in Figma, what you can do is you can take your annotation or whatever it is, and you can click that and then select whatever it is inside that instance that you want to link it to. And then you just click Align, and then you can, move it in place. You can do the same for maybe this. Let's say you want to align it with this item right here. You can select both of these, click on alignment, maybe move it a bit like this. And this one, maybe I'm going to align it with the button. I can do that, and I can do that. And that's alignment to nested instances, something that you can now do in Figma. Pretty cool. And finally, we're talking about some library updates. So let's assume that I have a library that I shared with this file, and I'm using some elements from that library. In this case, I'm using elements from a library that I called SysDashboard. And this just allows me to, create kind of a starter design system for some of my projects. So in here, I have a bunch of components defined, and a lot of text styles and color styles, right? And before, when you were working with libraries, whenever someone would update elements in a library, you would get a notification and you would update to the latest changes, but you would have to update everything, right? If there were 10 changes, then all 10 changes would have been pushed to your local file. Well, now you can do this individually, right? So for example, let's say that I have this badge here, right? And I want to double the padding. So I'm going to go 24 and 16, right? So, oops, 16 there. So it's a little bit bigger, right? Also, I have this text style applied to the section titles, and that is called card title. So if we look at the card title, it's using 21 pixels. Let's say I want this to be a lot bigger, 32 pixels, right? So now I can, publish all the changes. And then when I go back to the files that are using that library, it tells me component updates are available. And surely enough, if I select a certain component, I can see an icon here that says update available. So when I click this, I no longer need to apply every single change, but instead I can update just the selected instance. Or I can click review, update, and I can see a side-by-side comparison. And I can even make this bigger so I can see what was or what is currently in my system and what's updated in the library. Or I can do an overlay, and this is really cool. Right? I can see an overlay of the two. So this is what we had before, and this is the new and improved version. How cool is that? Right? So if I'm happy with the new changes, I click Update Instance. So by doing that, I only updated the title text style. The other component is still here. I still have an update for it, and I can choose to update it or not. I can keep older versions of my design along with the new ones. But if I want to, I can also click on Review here, right? And I can see a comparison, just like I did with the text, and I can choose to, update this instance, update all, and now everything is updated. And of course, now if I want to go back to what I had before, I can, select this one. I can go back to 21 pixels. I can select this and I can go back to 12 and 8. And of course, I can push the library and then I can review and I can update all just to bring it back the way I had it before. In terms of the library updates, the fact that you can now apply updates to individual instances and layers is super, super cool. It's impossible to discuss Figma without mentioning prototyping, right? Well, this update includes some really cool changes to prototyping, starting with sticky scrolling. So let's say that I have this homepage and I want to make this yellow bar sticky. So when it gets to the top, it stays there. So I can easily do that by switching to the prototype tab and selecting this bar. And then where it says position, I can choose sticky, stay at the top edge, right? So now if I open this prototype, as soon as I start scrolling, you'll see that the yellow bar stays on the top. How cool is that? And of course, you can go a lot further in this. Let's say I want to make this sidebar sticky, right? Well, again, I can select it and I can select sticky from here. Let's reopen the prototype. And now you'll see that not only the yellow bar is sticky, but also when we get to the sidebar, that becomes sticky as well. Very nice. Now, it would be cool to be able to set some kind of offset like, we have in CSS so that we can leave a gap on top of the element. I kind of bypassed that here by adding this padding here on the top. That's 64 pixels. Because if I didn't have the padding, the prototype would look something like this. So let's go open it again. All right. You'll see that as soon as I scroll up, it stays there, but it's kind of obscured by the yellow bar because that's also sticky, right? Because the sticky behavior only happens when the top edge of the element hits the top edge of the page. So yeah, that's why I said that it would be nice to have some sort of offset option here. But this is a step forward. I'm pretty sure if the Figma team is listening, they might be able to implement that. So, sticky scrolling in prototypes, really cool addition. Let's look at change number 2 when it comes to prototyping, and that is prototype links can now open in the same tab. So to give you a little bit of context, in prototyping mode, I can select an element and I can add an interaction. I can say that on click or whatever, I can open a link, right? And let's say that when I click this button, I'm going to go to envato.com, for example. And by default, this would open in a new tab, right? So if you would run this, and you clicked the link, it would open that link in a new tab. Well, now you can actually uncheck this so it opens in the same tab, right? So let's save that and let's do a restart. And now when I click this, it opens in the same tab. Very cool. Now, here's change number 3 when it comes to prototyping, and that's the ability to create multiple interactions in one go. So for example, I have this latest news section, and I want every single one of these images or cards to take me to the article page when I click it. So what you would usually do is you would select the element and you would click on the plus sign and you would create a noodle like this. So on click, navigate to the article page. And then you would select the second one and the third and so on and so forth, right? Now you have 3 interactions, but there's actually a much faster way of doing this. So what you can do is you can select a bunch of elements at the same time, and you can just click on the plus side once and just drag to where you want. So now that's going to create multiple interactions so that in your prototype, clicking any of these four, will take you to the article page. So that's update number 3 for prototyping. And finally, when it comes to prototyping, we have background blur on overlays. It's something that, from my understanding, was buggy before, but it works perfectly now. So let's say you have this overlay, right? It's a solid color with 50% opacity, and you want to add a background blur. So you go to Effects, you select Background Blur, you put in the amount, maybe, I don't know, 32. Right, so now, if you want to show this overlay in a prototype, of course, you can, let's select the button here, So on click, we're gonna open the mobile screen overlay, or this frame, as an overlay, So now, if we take a look, you'll see that it works beautifully. And the background blur is displayed correctly. So that was the 4th change to prototyping. And finally, we're going to look at some quality of life changes, and we're going to start with multi-select search. As we know, we have a search functionality in Figma, and we can bring up that search field by either clicking here or pressing Ctrl F. But now what's interesting is that we can multi-select the search results. So let's say that I'm looking for an article grid view, right? So these elements, right? These are called article grid view. So article grid view, Figma found every single one. I can, of course, click on each one, and Figma is gonna select it in the canvas. And also, if it's outside of my view, it's gonna scroll really nice. But now what I can do is I can multi-select. So I can select all of these, and I can change, whatever properties I want. Maybe I want a bigger spacing here between items because I'm using auto layout, or maybe I want to change the selection colors. Whatever it is, Figma allows me to do that really easily because I can now select multiple elements in the search results. Cool. The next quality of life change is about seeing the search field on the desktop app when you're creating a new tab. So if you click here on the plus sign to create a new tab, besides the usual stuff, the options to create a new design file or a new FigJam file, and a look at some of the recent files that we worked on, you now have the ability to search for a specific file. So let's say I want to open the Sys dashboard that I showed you earlier. I can do that very easily. So remember, this search functionality is only available in the desktop app. The third quality of life change has to do with rulers. So as you know, you can press Shift-R to bring up the rulers in Figma. And let's say you created a couple of rulers, just to assist you with the whole designing process. Maybe you have one here, maybe you have one, I don't know, here, something like that. So you have a bunch of rulers. And using Shift-R, you can hide them, but they're still there. They're not destroyed. And of course, you can click on each one and press backspace or delete to delete it. But now what you can do is you can right-click on either the top ruler or the left ruler, and you can remove all the vertical and the horizontal guides. And you can, of course, hide the rulers altogether with this option. So again, right-click to delete all the vertical or the horizontal guides. And finally, for quality of life change number 4, and the last one on our list, is the following. On desktop, when we have multiple tabs open, we can hover to see a preview of that file. Right, so maybe we have several files opened and maybe they're not labeled or named properly, right? Well, I can quickly use this functionality to get a preview of that file so I can determine what exactly is in it. Very, very nice addition. All right, and those are 20 of the new additions to Figma. Let us know if you enjoyed this video, and hey, question for you. Which one of these is your favorite? Let us know down in the comments. Also, don't forget to check out the Envato Tuts Plus YouTube channel for more content like this, but also to learn about web design, web development, and a whole lot more. It's all free, so make sure to also hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. I'm Adi, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.